very few horror films, and I'd consider Silence of the Lambs in that category, in spite of the book it's based on allegedly being credited for having killed horror novels, according to the author of Paperbacks from Hell, Grady Hendrix. Very few horror films have won Academy Awards for Best Picture. Never mind the level of sweep that Silence of the Lambs took when it came out. So, for the week of Halloween, it seems appropriate to cover this film. The first time I watched this movie was on a very small TV, about 13, 12 inches maybe, if that, on a DVD. Since then, it's gotten a 4K release, which I've watched for this rewatch, and I have a larger TV to watch it on, and better speakers. And also, I've actively, in the year since I watched Silence of the Lambs for the first time, gone out to see films in theaters more often, so I am more familiar with how movies look on a big theatrical screen and can extrapolate from there. So I wanted to give Silence of the Lambs a real reappraisal. I have not seen the film in theaters yet. None of my indie cinemas have been screening it as of this recording, but I do intend to give it a theatrical rewatch in the future. Also, since my first viewing, I'd seen both Manhunter and Red Dragon, so I came to this with several other directors and other actors' takes on Hannibal Lecter as an antagonist. This made for an interesting situation to come back to the work that made this particular man-eating serial killer part of the cultural zeitgeist. Probably the biggest takeaway that I had from the film this time around is how director Jonathan Demme and cinematographer Tak Fujimoto used the canvas of the screen. So many dialogue scenes between Anthony Hopkins and Lecter and Jodie Foster as Clarice Starling are dominated by incredibly tight close-up shots on the two actors' faces, each from the other's point of view, each image completely filling the screen. When I watched the film the first time, again, I saw it on a fairly small TV set, like barely a foot, corner to corner. And when I wasn't necessarily watching that many films in theaters at the time, so the impact of those shots hit, but not as hard. Over the years since then, in addition to having a much larger set than I did when I watched this originally, I've watched, again, more movies on the big screen. I've tried to make a habit at various points in time to go see movies in the theater more often and on larger screens where possible, in IMAX aspect ratios, that sort of thing. So you get in a position where you can understand now and extrapolate to what does this image look like on a screen that's almost 1.5 to 2 stories tall. It puts you in a position to have this sense of Lecter's intensity bearing down on you, contrasted with the shots of Starling struggling under that intensity, heightening the sense of an emotional struggle between the two, not necessarily one of hostility, like with Lecter and Will Graham in Manhunter/Red Dragon, but almost rivalry. Starling seeks to prove herself worthy in the misogynist, patriarchal environment of the FBI Academy, in front of her peers and the people that she'd be working with in the general law enforcement community, and she seeks to prove herself worthy of Lecter to get him to give her the information that's needed to save Buffalo Bill's latest victim. Lecter, while he taunts Clarice over the fate of the last person who sought to test him, also tests her, testing to see if she's an intellectual equal or prospective equal compared to the figures around him that he holds in contempt, like Dr. Chilton. I don't think that Lecter's call to Clarice Starling's graduation is necessarily one that implies a romantic relationship between the two, as a perspective that other people have considered. But I do think it fits with Lecter acknowledging Starling as someone who he views as an equal, but also someone who he doesn't seek to confront directly, so long as she doesn't become a threat to him. Similarly, with him not seeking out Will Graham again after his revenge through Francis Dollarhide in Red Dragon. I bring this all up because while I haven't seen Ridley Scott's Hannibal nor the Hannibal TV series, the other takes on Lecter never really got the same intensity. For all the efforts that Brett Ratner took to recreate the sets of Silence of the Lambs and bring back as much of the cast as possible to evoke the legacy of this film, Ratner was never quite able to use the camera to grab that same level of intensity that Demme did. And with Michael Mann and Manhunter, which came first, this level of close-up camera work is generally not in Mann's palette. He prefers a more naturalistic approach to filmmaking. There's a distance, deliberate distance that he puts with his characters in the scenes with Graham and with Lecter. In short, the direction, the framing with the camera that Jonathan Demme and Tak Fujimoto use in Silence of the Lambs is, I think, one of the things that makes it a film that stands on its own in the legacy of not just adaptation of the Hannibal Lecter stories, but also kind of horror cinema, and redefines it in a way that a lot of other films would have, in many respects, struggled to do in the years after. But still succeed. I definitely recommend getting the chance to see this on the highest resolution format you can, on the biggest screen you can. Indeed, if you can get the chance to see this in a movie theater, do so.
Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe, and also consider backing my Patreon. Patreon backers get episodes up to 1 week early of this show and any future Let's Plays. Also, please consider backing my Ko-fi. Toss me a few bucks, also helps support the show, and it's not a monthly obligation or anything like that.